Okay, guys, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay,
And
can
I
you
can
see
see
me
your
as
I can
well?
see your screen.
Okay, good. Then we can start. We can skip these slides. So my name is Stanislav Zhelyazkov, and I work for a cloud MSP called Sentia. I'm also Microsoft MVP in the cloud and data center management category for several years now. Today the topic is Azure Monitor Alerting, and if you have followed my blogs at cloudadministrator.net, you might have seen me blogging about that. I have currently some series that I'm still ongoing on the topic. Without further ado, let's move to the agenda for today. So we're gonna talk about why alerting, why it's important, and so on. We're going to look at different management strategies so we can basically figure out how to do alerting in Azure depending on what your strategies are or strategies is. We're going to see the different type of alerts that are present in Azure, not only in Azure Monitor, but for the topic, we're going to focus on the Azure Monitor type of alerts. We're going to talk about when to choose which type so we can figure out when we need to alert for something, which alert might be the best for our situation. We're going to talk about also alert integrations because without having just alerts without actually doing anything, it doesn't lead to nothing. We're going to demo and then we have a QA as well. Moving to why alerting. So alerting is important because it basically turns your raw data into knowledge. By having alerts and creating these alerts, you're basically creating a knowledge for the health of your application, the health of your infrastructure, the health of your network, and so on and so on. Also, there are, as I said, health signals for your apps and infrastructure. So basically, if something is going wrong, we can get an alert and try to fix it. There are also chance to do a self-healing because we can do remediation. In the scenarios where you know what's the problem, you can, for example, when you get an alert, you can fire some automation automatically, and this to resolve your error and basically heal your service or application, etc. It allows you also to do automatic troubleshooting because, for example, what you can do is based on alert. If you know what that alert is about, you can start maybe some other automation to do some troubleshooting on the server, on the application, and so on. So basically, getting maybe more logs or maybe more data and presenting that data to you, so you can once you have to start to work on the alerts, on the incidents that you have, to basically have some information already available for you that will help you to resolve the issue as fast as possible. Also, the alerts also allows you to avoid any critical failures on time. So, for example, if you have a problem with the free disk space, you get alerts on time. You may resolve it before it actually becomes too critical to your application. So moving to management strategies, you might have seen that basically you can go with centralized or decentralized. And the centralized basically represents where you are from a single department or single team and so on. You're basically configuring the monitoring for the different applications and so on from a single place or maybe from a single team. And you're basically taking care of all the configuration, not only for alerting, but also could be governance like policies and so on. You're basically controlling all that and the different teams that you have could be dev teams, could be DevOps teams or other application teams. They basically just consume the configurations that you have made for them. In the decentralized way, Basically, the different teams have autonomy, so they can control what to alert upon, what is, for example, these settings on their applications, how they are set, and so on. So they can basically have this kind of setup. Of course, you can actually have mixed. You can have mix of both. And basically, in that situation, you put some configuration on some settings upon your teams on their resources, but still allow some kind of autonomies for the different teams to decide and take different decisions. So, for example, you might monitor the, let's say, a team has an application that consists of virtual machines. You might monitor the health of the virtual machines, but leave the health and the monitoring of the application to the actual team that is owning that application. Now moving on to different alert types. As you can see, we have a lot of alert types. Some of these are not part of Azure Monitor. They are part of other services, but it's good to mention them here. We also have different subtypes for the different alerts, but those are just a subtype. They're meaning that they just differ from the way they are configured and a little bit on the way they are working. But in general, you configure these alerts with the same API or, let's say, portal experience and so on. So we have activity log based alerts. So any Azure service that is available basically puts information in the activity log. That's basically the audit log of Azure services. That information is logged for every update or put or delete or create action that you have on Azure resources. So based on these events, you can actually alert. Of course, we have these administrative events, but we also have different events in that activity log. For example, security is when alert from Azure Security Center is being created. It actually goes also into the activity log as a security category. In case you have, in case Azure has some kind of outage on different services in different regions, if your deployed services are in those regions, you'll get service health alerts basically. So that will help you, for example, to get notified when there are some issues on a global or regional level. So you can maybe do some kind of failover or some other actions in order to make sure your service continue to work. The alert is basically currently only when you configure some activity log-based alerts, you actually get a log as alert that has been configured. Advisor, these are coming from Azure Advisor. As you know, in Azure Advisor, we have different recommendations that you can implement in order to improve your services in terms of high availability, cost, and so on. When such a recommendation is generated, these goes also to the activity log. We have policy alerts, so when you actually go and configure some policies, and these policies are being assessed when you deploy new resources or when you or when they apply to existing resources, and you get a log in the activity log that, for example, this policy is compliant for this resource or not compliant, and so on. We have autoscale as well. Autoscale is a service that's part of Azure Monitor. It's available for a certain type of resources that supports it. For example, web app, where you can configure an auto-scale configuration where we can basically expand or scale out, scale in your workloads based on different metrics. And when that scaling out or scaling in is happening, events are generated. So you can basically alert on that. So let's say if for example, you have some service that is scaling too big and you're wondering what's happening because maybe your website is being bombarded by too many requests, you might want to get alerted on those kind of events. And when we have also resource health. Resource health is a new feature in Azure Monitor, where basically besides basically signals the health of your specific resource. It just provides general information like for VMs, if the VM is running and the VM agent is communicating to that VM. If it's not communicating, maybe the VM is marked as running, but there is a blue screen of date or something like that. You basically, the resource health information will change there and you can get alerted on these scenarios. Azure Monitor for VMs, these alerts are currently they have moved from public preview to private preview. I would guess that they would do some refactoring on the work there to make them better, but basically Azure Monitor for VMs allows you to track the health of your VMs, and these alerts were basically health for different metrics and different services. It's very similar on how it looks if you have worked with SCOM. It's basically is adapting similar health model and similar health alerts. We also have metric alerts, and the metric alerts are based on metrics. These metrics in Azure Monitor sit in a data store for metrics. So if we look at the different stores, so activity log based alerts, they get their information from the activity log store. Metrics alerts get their data from the metric store, and log analytics alerts get data from log analytics workspace. So the metric alerts, you have 3 types of alerts, but mainly 2. You have static and dynamic. You can alert on the metrics that are coming from the Azure services, or you can alert on metrics that you have sent to the service as well. The static is just putting simple threshold on a different metric. Aggregation could be average, for example. And if the threshold is reached, you're gonna get alert. Dynamic is more complicated one because more complicated from what is happening on the backend, but it's actually easier to configure because basically allows you to have machine learning for your workloads, where the metric basically learns what is the normal behavior for that metric for your application or your resource, and alerts you only if there are some kind of anomalies happenings. So we have some machine learning algorithms happening there in order to learn the behavior of your application. And we have availability test alerts. These are again metric alerts, but just have a slightly different configuration. Availability test alerts you can configure in application insights. That is part of Azure Monitor. With that service, as you can know, you can monitor different applications. Most of the scenarios there are around web applications. So basically, you can ping a website and get specific requests, and based on that, monitor if the website is up and down. When you create the availability test, you can actually have the possibility also to create a metric alert for that. So when, let's say, your site goes down or start getting errors like 400 or 500, you can basically get the alert for that. And we have log analytics alerts. There we have two types, number of results and metric measurement. The main difference between those is that of how the query is being executed basically, and how the instances of the alerts are being generated. We're gonna look at later point more about these alerts. And we have cost management alerts. These are coming from Azure Cost Management Service. Basically, you create a budgets for specific subscriptions or specific resource groups or specific tags, and you can get alerted when that budget has reached certain threshold. And we have Azure Sentinel alerts. These are slightly similar to log alerts, but also they have some of their own types there. But basically, if you configure custom alerts, most of them are based on having a custom query that needs to have specific structure there in order to be able to create an Azure Sentinel alert. So from all these alerts, cost management in Azure Sentinel doesn't appear in the Azure Monitor Alerts blade. All the others can be seen there when there is an instance being generated or when you want to edit a specific alert. Moving into going deeper into the different alert types. For the activity log based alerts, I'll just cover the basics of all of the all types there, because they basically have similar properties that are the same for each type. So if you haven't heard about common alert schema, I suggest you to check it out. But basically, all the Azure Monitor alerts are trying to follow certain schema. So all the alerts have certain properties that are the same between them. So when you're trying to process that alert in other ITSM tools or automation and so on, you can basically expect the same results in those fields that are common for all the alerts. So these alerts support that schema. The alerts are being fired by instance, so every activity record that you see, it will be one instance of that alert if it matches the criteria that is being defined. All these alerts have default severity of 4. You cannot configure it, but if you have, for example, something like some ITSM system, you can definitely make some kind of integration to have different severities based on what is the alert name, for example. These alerts can be scoped to different levels. So when you create the alert, you can scope to the whole log in a single subscription, or you can scope it to the log that is generated for a resource group, or even for specific resource as well. They are easy to build conditions. Most of them you can configure from the portal, but if you want to have some more advanced conditions, you can basically use our templates. We're going to show some examples later in this session. These are global resources. That means they are not tied to specific region, just like action groups, which we'll also talk about later. These are global resources, so they are not affected by region specific issues. They could be affected, for example, if there is a global issue that is available in Azure. Most of the alerts of different types, they are easy to configure, meaning that you can easily create a condition and get alerts for a specific thing that you want to achieve. But for example, for policy category, they are not very flexible because you cannot, for example, alert on specific, let's say, policy and so on. For that, of course, you can send these logs to log analytics and basically create log alerts from there for the policies. And maybe we'll have, if we have time, maybe I'll show some initial work on that. Moving to metric alerts. As I said, there are 3 subtypes for these. Currently, these are per resource alerts. So if you have like single web app, you have to create a metric alert only for that web app. You cannot, for example, create a metric alert that is applicable for every web app in your subscription. But that is going to change. Currently in preview, you can configure alerts that are for metrics for Azure virtual machines. You can configure such kind of alerts for, let's say, the scope of the subscription. So you can have, let's say, one alert that signals high CPU usage, and that alert will apply to all the VMs that are in that subscription and region. When you add new virtual machines in that region, you basically these VMs automatically will be monitored by that alert without you having to modify it. This allows for scale management if you want to apply certain alerts for all your subscriptions. These alerts support the common alert schema. They don't require log analytics workspace. If you may know that by default you get 90 days of Azure metrics data that you can view in Azure portal, and that data is free. So when you alert, you don't pay for the metric data, you pay only for the alert itself that is being created. Again, these are also global resource, and they don't apply to specific region. But when you, for example, create these per subscription scope alerts, you have to provide the region, but only the region for the resources to which you apply. It's not the region where the alert is created. For this, you can set the severity from 0 to 4, these are the allowed values for Azure Monitor Alerts. These are very also suitable for critical workloads because you can basically have frequency of the alert being assessed every 1 minute. So if you have such kind of workloads that, for example, you need to know to make sure that the CPU is not under above certain thresholds every minute, you can do that for the different resources in Azure. As I said, you have static and dynamic. And dynamic basically have built-in machine learning that you can use. The good thing about these alerts is also they are auto-resolved. They have auto-resolved state, where if the threshold is returning back to the normal, the created metric is turning below the threshold, basically the alert will get auto-resolved. So that's very handy when you want to, we have to make sure that this issue is not happening anymore. Currently, you can have up to 2 conditions. So basically, you can have 2 metrics. And these 2 metrics basically can be configured only when both of them are applicable, then raise the alert. For example, you may want to raise alert when the CPU and the memory is above certain threshold. Moving forward to log alerts, we have 2 subtypes, as I said before. They could be set to fire per instance. So if you use the metric measurement alerts, you can actually fire per each log entry or log record that is generated by the query to have separate alert. This is very handy for not having alert like iCPU with 5 or 6 computers in that single alert instance. These are regional, meaning that because they rely on the log analytics workspace, basically the region needs to match the region of the log analytics workspace. Require log analytics workspace or app insights, because log analytics workspace and the app insights instances, they are basically using the same Kusto platform beneath. Basically the alerts for them are the same, you just reference a different resource ID. They are suitable for at scale management because in single workspace you can manage resources and VMs from different subscriptions, even from different clouds or on-premises data centers, now with Azure Arc. So you can create one alert that applies for, let's say, for all the VMs in your workspace, no matter where they are located. They can span multiple workspaces, which means that you can create one alert that basically gets data from more than one workspace or more than one app insight instance. That way, let's say if you want to keep certain resources from region A to send their data only to workspace from region A and resources from region B, they can send to region B. You can create one alert that spans across these two workspaces into the different regions and have one alert for all the instances, no matter to which workspace they report. They support the common alert schema. They provide very flexible thresholds and definitions because they are based on Kusto queries. You can have, besides different aggregations, you can use some of the built-in also machine learning algorithms in Kusto in order to achieve the desired effect for your alerts. You can set also severity on them, as I have said before. So when to choose which type of alert, right? So definitely when you have something around the activity log, just use the activity log based alerts rather the log alerts, with the exception with the policy category, of course, if you want to. Allows you to easily configure what you desire as to be fired for a specific event, and also you can scope it to subscriptions. So let's say if you have 3 subscriptions and you want to have the same alert, you're just gonna create the same alert in each subscription, and it will be scoped to the desired subscription that you want to get alert upon. So we have 3 alerts at the end. For the same thing, but it will be distributed to each subscription. Metric alert, if you want to have different teams defining their own alerts, then and they're critical for the workloads, then you can choose the metric alerts. Different teams can create these alerts for them and basically signal only for the resources they own. That allows you to provide granularity and flexibility. So for some teams, one threshold could be critical, for others might not be. So this allows that flexibility. And of course, with the future expansion of being able to create these alerts to scope to specific subscription, it also makes sense to scale these alerts. So if you want to apply a certain alert for every subscription, I would advise you use those if you have the metric in Azure, rather using the log analytics alerts. And the log analytics alerts are when you cannot achieve something with these other alerts. You can do it with log analytics alerts, of course. And also the actual if you have, for example, different logs that are not or maybe are event based, or maybe they cannot be sent to custom metrics or and so on, you can basically use the log analytics alerts by sending the data to log analytics workspace, because the workspaces are pretty flexible on what kind of data you can store there. From the tool alerts, I would use number of results only if you have alerts specific to application and sites, because there the alerts will be scoped to that application and sites instance, and usually application and sites instance is created per application. When you have alerts that span across multiple resources, I would use the metric measurement alert, so you can basically fire alert for each instance that you want to that you have in your data. Cost management, I think these are pretty clear for budget alerts, and you have Azure Sentinel, which are specific to that, using that service. Let's talk about integrations a little bit. So we have currently two ways of methods for integrations. One is action groups and the other is action rules. Action rules is currently in preview. The action groups basically they allow you to signal to different signals. These could be email, SMS, call, notifications on the Azure web app, on the Azure app, mobile app. You can have the data sent to webhook or to secure webhook. Secure webhook is a new way primarily used with IDSM integrations currently. Automation, you can send the data for automation runbook to function, to logic app, or to ITSM. Basically, although you see different types, but basically, no matter if you use webhook, automation, runbook, function, or logic app, you're basically sending the common alert schema to these endpoints, and they basically have a JSON document that's being sent to them, and then you can process it based on the input that is being provided. And we have so one thing important to mention to action groups is that when you create the alert, you actually configure which action groups that alert should be attached to. With action rules, we basically have two scenarios. One is suppression scenario and the other actions at scale. Actions at scales allows you to not configure the basically decouples the action groups from the alert rules. So you don't attach the action rules to the alert rules. Basically create an action rule, and depending on the conditions in those action rules, they will automatically fetch the alert for which they will apply. For example, you can say, I want any alert that is generated for that subscription to send to use this action group as a integration. Basically, that makes it a little bit more easier, so you don't have to configure the action groups per alert. Basically, you configure the action rules at a certain level, and then all the alerts that matches the criteria of the action group will apply, and will automatically pick the firing of the action group based on the criteria. And the second scenario is the suppression. So instead of trying to disable certain alerts when, let's say, you have maintenance window for something, and of course it could be that the maintenance window only applies to certain instances. It doesn't apply to all instances that you monitor. So instead of disabling the alerts, you can basically create these suppression rules or action rules. So when something happens and it happens for these type of instances or these name of instances, then you can basically disable any action integration. That will not, let's say, fire an email or webhook and so on. That is basically, we can compare it to maintenance windows in SCOM. And as I said, the criteria that you can define is very flexible there. So you can define it even on some data that is being sent from a log analytics query. So if you have some kind of output in the query that signals these are servers in group B, you can basically create an action group that is suppressing the alerts for that specific window for the servers from category B, let's say. Let's now move on to the demos. I think we still have some time. Okay. So this is my Azure environment, my subscription. As you can see, I have here one group, resource group, but what I don't have is a group called MP University that I want to create and basically create different alerts in that group, on that resource group, so I can basically monitor my environment. Instead of doing that, creating these alerts manually, I can basically, in this case, fire a CI/CD pipeline. And the CI/CD pipeline basically applies ARM templates that basically deploys all these resources. So let's fire a new pipeline. Not here. I need to go to the job and run a new pipeline, right? So let's run that. The job will be queued and at some point started. Let's wait until it finishes. So the job is now started. And the important step is here, Azure deployment. So I'm basically doing ARM template deployment. It's already creating deployment with that name. And if all is okay, it should finish successfully. Let's give it a little more time. We can actually go and see that I should have a new group. So I'm creating the new MP University group. You might see that there is no resources, but that's just because they are hidden. So if I go here, you can see that they have actually different alert types. To visualize this better, we can actually go to the alerts section and go to manage alert rules. And we can see all these alerts created here. They are enabled status. This one has finished, just to show you that all is good. And we can see that we have different alerts created. They have different definitions, different types. So if I want to go and populate the same alerts to another subscription, I can basically do that very easily by just changing my configuration. Another thing that I can do, this is basically the repository from which the information is fetched and deployed to the subscription. I have here parameters by basically defining the different groups. So I have I can configure different action group for each alert. But what I can do is basically configure the threshold. So I can say I want this to be 15. So I can commit that change. I have to wait for source control. Not sure why it's not appearing. In any case, I can go and edit that information here. So if we go to the repository, templates, parameters, edit. So I can say this 15. Commit. We can commit that. This will automatically should fire a pipeline for me. So a new job in the pipeline. And it should start to do the same thing. And once it's done, we're going to see that threshold being changed. So this is the load space. You can see that the threshold is still 10. We have to wait until this is being applied. While this is being applied, you can think of ARM templates and the structure in the how you're gonna apply them as management packs in SCOM. So basically, you package the things into different ARM templates, and these basically represents your management packs for Azure, if you will. As Azure resource management templates, they are universal way of deploying Azure resources, not just for Azure Monitor Alerts. You can also deploy different log analytics workspaces and other resources that you may have in your environment. So basically, that is the way that you can put your knowledge into code and apply it repeatedly across different subscription environments and so on. So we can go and see now the threshold. As you can see, now it's 15. So when my knowledge about my environment changes, I can easily go and change that one without having to do some big changes. I just have these parameterized, so I can basically easily configure my alerts. The next things I want to show is automatic remediation. If you have read our Inside Azure Management book that we wrote with a couple of other MVPs, you might have seen that example, but I just want to show it for this scenario as well. So here I'm running basically PowerShell commands on the server. They will stop certain service. And I have configured an alert that basically when fired, it will go and start automation runbook. And when that runbook is started, it will go to the machine and basically start the service. So in case you have some service that is, as you can see now, it's stopped, that is not always starting as it should be, you can basically configure automation for that one and remediate it when it happens. We can wait for the job to start, or because the alert runs every 5 minutes, it will take some time, but we can see that I have done this before yesterday. You can see that this is the data that is being sent. The data is being sent in the common alert schema. I'm processing that data in the runbook, and basically I know which service has stopped, and I go to the machine and start it. This is without having even an actual authorization to the VM. I basically use the authorization I have to run scripts on the Azure machines. I can do that. So it allows me for easier remediation. And maybe the third example that I want to show is that you might be in a situation where you want to alert on something, but you don't know how to build the query. Basically, I'm gonna show you how to build a query, for example, when a server has been restarted, and you want to know has been restarted gracefully, has been restarted dirty, or it has some kind of blue screen of that. You want to know that information, and you want to get alerted on that, so you're aware of what is happening in your environment. So for that reason, I configured the log analytic workspace to gather information for the system log, and that's where my information is located. So I have event. You may see that I have run this before. So we know that this is located in the event log for system. So I'm saying system, and I can get all the events from the system event log. Hopefully it will run faster. There are some issues in West Europe today, so if you have some problems, please excuse me. Let's try to run it again. Problems always happens on demos, if you don't know that. Okay, let's try maybe scope it. Maybe that will help getting results faster. So I know that when I get 606 event ID, this is graceful restart. When I get 608 ID, this is basically a dirty shutdown. And when I have events ID 100 and 101, these are basically restoring from bug check. So I want to get the events for any of these. So I'm creating a query that will scope only for these event IDs. I'm not going to wait to finish because I want to show you that in any case. But these are just events. I want to make things more. Human readable, so I can basically create some logic in log analytics. So let's hide this one. Let's hide this one. So I want to create some logic in log analytics where if certain event is present, I want to have the restart reason for that. So we have this logic with if, where if it's this event, we say it started gracefully. If it's not this event, we then continue to search for the other event. Let's say the next event is for dirty shutdown. If it's not dirty shutdown, then it's one of these two. Then these are restored from bug check. And let's try again to execute it. Maybe, yeah. So I get the results now. I have played yesterday, so you can see the restart reason is there. Started gracefully. But I want to alert on that, right? Because this is our event-based alerts. We basically don't have threshold. Our threshold is basically this kind of filtering that we have here. This is our threshold. But the metric measurement alerts asks us to have aggregated value as a column. Because of that and the powerful language, we can basically have static value. So basically everything that is here should have aggregated value column with value of 1. And basically we want to get alerted if any of these matches the filtering criteria. But we also have, with metric measurements, we have to use summarize and to have bin as a operator in our logic. Then we do this, copy the wrong column. So argmax basically returns all the latest records based on resource ID and restart reason. Every VM in this case will have resource ID if it's located in Azure. And now with Azure Arc, actually, the Azure Arc VMs will also have this resource ID. And we want to aggregate based on the resource ID and the reason. So for each reason, even if I have the same server and the server first was restarted first graceful and then dirty shutdown, I would get a separate record for that. And I want to have these in bins of 5 minutes because that will be also my time window and the frequency. So when I execute that, it will be showing the same results, but it will, if you have multiple entries for the different records, you're gonna get more results. So now that I have these alerts, I can just go and create a new alert based on that. I have that, and most information will be automatically populated, but I need to make some changes. So I need to select metric measurement. That's the alert I'm creating. I want this to be greater than 0. So because everything will be, the aggregated value will be 1, this will be greater than 0. I can say total breach is greater than 0 as well to make sure that any record that is being generated, I can basically alert upon. So one thing that you cannot select here is because the query is still being executed. You have to actually wait a few minutes, but you can actually select the fields for which you want to aggregate. So the fields that you select here will basically define the unique instance that you want to alert. So every unique instance will have its own alert instance when it's being fired, when that threshold is being reached. In that case, we're gonna select the resource ID and the restart reason. I'm not sure if the query will be generated, but then, as I said, the period will be 5 minutes and the frequency will also be 5 minutes, and we can basically create the alert that way. I'll wait a few more seconds, but if it doesn't happen, I guess it's a bad day for log analytics today. Okay, I think we still have some time for the questions, but I want just to show you about the policies. What I have started here is to basically process the activity log here. And what I'm creating, because policies, so if we go to the properties, so this is the properties of the original log, we have policies, and you can have actually multiple records in the policies, but you want to create for each policy that is in this policies field, you want to create a separate record. You can do that by doing some processing on the JSON properties field, and then basically in policy I just have a single one. So for each, I'm basically splitting the records for each policy. I'm creating a new record here. That way I can basically say, for this policy assignment, I can create an alert that basically only covers this policy assignment name. And then I can monitor only specific policies rather having to monitor all the policies that are happening, because some policies might not be so critical that you want to get alert on when they are not being followed. But there could be some policies that for certain you want to get alerted when someone has break that policy, especially if you have configured them as audit. Of course, if you have configured them as deny, you will not be able to create, the person who has to create the resources will not be able to create them, because everything passes through ARM, and the policies are directly interacting with ARM in order to make sure that nothing that is forbidden by the policies is being deployed. But for those in audit that you just want to get notified, you can do that. And that's I think all I had for today. So we can move to the Q&A.
Yeah, that's great, Stanislav. Thank you so much. There are some questions. I see 5 or 6 questions there, and we have Kevin Holman doesn't start until 45 minutes after the hour, so we have some additional time to go through the questions and anything else you may want to cover.
Yeah, let me just find out. So all the that are not answered, correct?
Yeah. So if you go to the if you open up or expand the questions, go right to the very bottom. You'll see the questions that are related to your session.
So George asks, can you monitor a website which require authentication? You can do that. If you have application sites, previously that was done by creating something called a web test. You had to go fire up Visual Studio, create that complex web test in Visual Studio, and then save that web test as a web test file and upload it to Azure to the alert for probability alert for the application and sites. I think Microsoft is moving away from that way because first it requires to have Visual Studio Enterprise and so on. Now I think they're opting to creating a function, and that function to run on a certain interval, and the function does the authentication to the website, and based on the results it says availability test is successful or not. I think they already published those documents how to do that. If you cannot find them, let me know and I will try to find them and provide you with the information. So I think in the future, if you have complex text or complex tests or tests that require some kind of authentication, you have to basically build some simple Azure function to do that, and the Azure function will load the results correctly into the availability tests table in the application site instance. So it will look just like you are creating a regular web test in application sites. So again, George asks, how would you go ahead and generate an alert every time someone creates something new in Azure? So you can still see my screen. Depends on if you want to generate for everything new, I think that will be just too much. But if you want to go ahead and generate alert based on a specific resource group, for example, if a resource group is created, you can do that, and I'm going to show you the example here. I have it somewhere here. So this is the alert about resource group was created. It's activity log alert, as I have said. You have scope to the subscription. So when you deploy it to that subscription, for every subscription when a resource group is being created, you can get an alert to specific action group. As you can see here, there is specific status code here created. So in order not to get alerted when the resource group is updated, only when it's created, you can actually use that status code. So that will help you find out when something is being created. In this case, resource group. You can use the similar method for other resources as well. Could be a web app, could be and so on. But if you don't want specific resources to be created, you can use actually Azure policy to block specific types of being created. So that's the way you should do it. And I hope that answers your question, of course. So Karen asks, is there Azure Alert Monitor installed on Azure can be installed on-prem SCOM? It has to be on Azure Cloud. It was said can access on-prem SCOM, correct? Not sure if I understand fully the question, but the alerts that you set, they are applied for every resource that you have onboarded, not only to Azure, but to Log Analytics as well. So even if you're sending data from other clouds or from servers on premises, you can basically alert on them on the data that you have gathered for them. So the alerts for Azure can span across different clouds and different locations. So we are not limited to just monitoring Azure with Azure alerts. And I hope that answers the question. If not, I think you can ask it, and maybe these questions can be gathered, and I can ask them offline if it's needed. Are these templates available somewhere? I will try to publish them on my repository. Some of these things might be available on my GitHub repository. But in any case, expect to be available here in Azure templates. I have links. For example, when I did the post about cost management, I have published those templates here. So expect the templates from this demo also to be published there. Yeah, I think we'll be able to see them there and to look them and find them if they're useful for you. On the create rule screen, I see condition with an estimated cost. Is that how much each run of these will cost? So no, the alerts are priced for specifically the Log Analytics alerts that I showed. They are priced per month, per hour, I think, basically. But basically, if you configure one alert with the lowest frequency, which is 5 minutes, it costs $1.50. If the frequency is 15 minutes, it costs 50 cents. But with one alert, you can actually cover, let's say, 100 virtual machines, let's say, or 100 Azure resources, depends on your scale. That's where Log Analytics alerts allows you to scale, because they can span across multiple resources with single alert that costs $1.50. If you have like a smaller environment, you might also want to start creating metric alerts in order to start to have an alert for each the resource. That way the cost will be distributed between the resources. And that's also somehow related to how you basically manage the cost in your organizations as well. Because when these alerts are shared, someone has to pay the price, and it's up to you how you're going to distribute it in the overall Azure cost. Keep in mind that when alert is fired, you're not paying for anything, but if you have an action group to that, you're paying the action for the action group being fired. And those action groups, you can find out the pricing in Azure Monitor, how much it costs to fire an action group. And if you have some automation like Azure Automation, you basically, for the time the runbook runs, you also pay some kind of price. So it's up to you if you're gonna use these kind of automations or not, and how we're gonna build your monitoring. We have another question. This is only needed if we don't have SCOM already, correct? No and yes. It's up to you if you're gonna use SCOM and Azure Monitor together, or you're gonna use just SCOM, or you're gonna use Azure Monitor. There are certainly things that Azure Monitor can do and SCOM cannot do, and the other way around is also true as well. It's important that whether you have just had SCOM for now and want to move to Azure, maybe for some workloads or maybe some different parts, it's also important to start basically reinventing how you do monitoring, because the way that SCOM gathers data and alert is being done there is a bit different, and so we have to basically modernize some of the rules that you have in ESCOM in order to move them to Azure Monitor if you go into that route. So it's very dependent on the different strategies that you're gonna take. I know that it's more of a too general answer, but I hope it helps you. I don't see any other questions.
And so we have a couple of minutes left. Any other questions before we let Stan go? Please use that questions window to ask your question. Maybe just while we're waiting, Stanislav, maybe I could just ask you a question. If you've had any experience working with SCOM customers who want to move some or all of their monitoring infrastructure up to Azure. I think I think we have a lot of SCOM users on the webinar today, so that might be a scenario that they would be interested in.
Yeah, I had some scenarios of those. Usually, if you're going to move the cloud, the best thing to do is to start monitoring your Azure resources with Azure Monitor and leave the on-premises resources to ESCOM. Because I think that creates the best of both worlds. And when you start to maybe get traction on more knowledge about Azure Monitor and how the alerting goes there and what kind of data you can get there and so on, then you can start to move your migration from the ESCOM management packs and the ESCOM monitoring to Azure Monitor. For sure, if you have VMs in Azure, you can still use ESCOM if you if you prefer that, because, for example, ESCOM has a lot of built-in knowledge in different management packs that in Azure Monitor, you basically have to build some of these things on your own. But it's a matter of having that knowledge and being able to achieve what you can with ESCOM in Azure Monitor. And as I said before, try to reinvent some of the management that you have done on-premise to how we do it in Azure, because we all know that with things in Azure, things are moving into a different pace compared to how are things in the on-premises resources. So that's important to keep in mind when you're thinking about overall management.
Yep, that's great. Well, I don't see any more questions, Stanislav. So I think at this point in time, we can thank you very much for your session. A lot of great information, a lot of really detailed content that you delivered to the MP University event today, which we really appreciate. Really appreciate your time and your effort putting together this session. And this is certainly a subject that is going to become more and more relevant to, I think, a lot of us. So perhaps we could invite you back on at some point in the future and get some more of your thoughts on this. So yeah. Once again, Stanislav, thank you so much.
Okay.
And I'll just